Well, here we are, Julian. Hello, everyone who's listening and the
Potentially watching.
potentially watching. This is our episode 10, but episode 1 of in-person recording. So bear with us, folks, but welcome. I'm Jacky Petit-Homme, and this is Julian DiLeonardo. Julian, say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. That was very short and brief. I appreciate it. So this is Inevitable Wealth. We're looking to clear the air around complex topics or headlines that come across your desk every day. And today we're going to talk about age-based, I guess, financial strategies that folks should be thinking of. So we're going to break it down from 20 to 40, 40 to 60-ish, give or take, and then 60, 65 plus. So let's start at the top. So Julian, so for the folks that are listening, the dozens of them out there, what should someone in their 20s, early career, maybe young family should be thinking about right now?
Yeah, great question. We get a lot of folks reaching out regularly, right, from all different demographics. But age 20 to 40, so much of it is about building a strong foundation, right? And that's easy to say, harder to do. I would say it's the knowledge and skills phase. So in the 20s and 30s, you're laying the groundwork for your financial future. And they can be extremely impactful years in a lot of different ways because one, there's investing where your investments have more time to compound, right? And then there's two, the qualitative, the skills, right, that then have more time to compound as well, right? If you're used to saving 20% of your income at age 25, that may not be as much, but age 50, right, that skill that you developed pays off in the long term. What would you add there? Anything you would add, Jacky?
Yeah, I think we should really hone in on the idea of the habits. Like, what are the habits are you creating now when, hopefully, right, as your career evolves, you're going to have higher income and more money. So the habits you instill now, right, a lot of people tend to think, hey, I'm going to make more money, so I'm going to be able to save more later on. And that's not the case. So, early on 20s, 30s, this is the very important time to kind of lay that foundation.
Exactly. If you're used to spending 100% of your paycheck, that is not going to change year to year, right? You need to develop the skill or at least set in place a process to limit that. But that's point one. So in your 20s and 30s, really focus on developing a cash flow management plan, right? A spending plan. Spend less than you make. Most of the families that we serve that are successful, really quite simple. They spend less than they make, they invest the rest, and they're logical about it, right? I think that really has a huge impact, even though it sounds so easy. Two, investing, right? Getting started. Time is your greatest ally. If you can, rough math, historically double your funds every 10 years if you're invested in a moderately aggressive portfolio, diversified, et cetera, you have a lot more time to do that, right? If you double every 10 years from 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, the dollar you put in at 20 is obviously extremely impactful because it doubled at least one extra time compared to future years. You want to make sure that you are maxing out your Roth IRA if possible, maybe a Roth 401k if that's offered, because these will likely be your lowest earning years as well, where your highest earning years tend to be in your late 40s, 50s, and 60s. Avoid Robinhood. I think I think if you use the word alpha or tell me you do foreign exchange trading, please stop, please quit. We do get that a lot. A lot of folks calling in, asking for advice on obscure things like that. I'm really a huge proponent of follow your dreams, never give up. But if you're trying to be a day trader, just stop. It's done. It's not going to happen on your iPhone, and just save yourself the time before you burn yourself.
Very valid points. If you work at Comcast in their marketing department, you're not a day trader, right?
Yes.
If you want a hobby, get a pet, start knitting, pick up pickleball. There's so many things you can do that won't be detrimental to your financial life. And there's something about the internet these days that gives folks that confidence, or you always have that buddy who was successful at one point in time in Forex or whatever those things you mentioned, and everyone thinks they could do it. So save money. Listen, you're not going to outperform the market over the long term. So just put it away there. So some other things as well early on, right? If you have a young family, you know, you want to think about planning for your children's education, right? If that's something you want to. There's not a right or wrong answer. Some folks say, hey, I want my kids to have skin in the game. Some folks say I want to pay for every penny. But understand what your goal is there. And also, speaking of young families, there's increasing, I'd say, demographic of families that don't want to combine finances completely, right? We have two independent people who make their own income, and they want to figure out what's the best way. So that's something as well that we should, I think, address a little bit about combining finances, because that's something that comes across our table pretty often.
Absolutely, so much of it comes down to communication, right? It's something that uh, that's a big part of what we do is help communicate between spouses, right? Because they have different financial histories, upbringings, views on things, and a lot of times, right? Jacky and I are both married. There's things you don't necessarily want to bring up over dinner that you could just it's easy to kick the can. Whereas if you bring in a third party, it's a lot easier to find that meeting in the middle component. I think you said it, Jacky. A single ox pulls 5,000 pounds, while two oxen yoked together can pull 15,000. Right. So working as a team can have a huge positive outcome compared to working alone and being siloed.
No, that's a great point, and thanks for quoting me on that. But it's true. There isn't a right or wrong way. It's like what works for you, and as long as you're both on the same page and you're sharing your same goals and you're moving in the same direction, like you will find success as much as you can, right? So a couple last things while we're on talking about the young phase, right? The 20s, 30s is, of course, is maximizing your employee benefits and stock plans, right? Of course, everyone's situation is different, but if you're at one of these kind of major corporations, there's your match that you want to make sure you're taking advantage of, health insurance, company stock options. You know, these things, they may seem minute, but can definitely boost your confidence financially in the long run. So what else would you add for this kind of stage one, Julian?
Yeah, even more than knowing what your company benefits are, learning how to read these documents, learning what sort of strategies you should put into place, because over time you're going to continue to see more and more of this. And a lot of the younger families we serve that do have hundreds of thousands in company stock, they have it because they've learned what the system looks like, know what to seek when looking for a new job, and then know how to strategize around those stock options or RSUs to maximize the benefit, right? Because the company wants you to maximize the benefit, but it can be challenging to sort of learn how much you are eligible to get, right, from an RSU standpoint or a stock standpoint, and essentially knowing your 401k match, how to maximize that with everything else going on, and really navigating these types of things. With that, I would also add, we don't want to encourage disloyalty with your employer, but a lot of the younger folks who are in their 30s, who tend to be in the strongest position, have changed jobs, 3, 4, 5 times, right? And they're continuously looking not for lateral moves, though that can certainly work, but for moves that continue to allow them to climb and get those stock options matches, et cetera, whether it's in Silicon Valley, whether it's in Austin, Texas, or whether it's right here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's a good point. And definitely, we'll do a disclaimer. We're not career coaches. But yeah, there was a labor statistic that came out earlier this year, maybe end of last year, that folks, I think they did pharmaceutical space, that individuals are able to kind of, I guess, climb that corporate ladder faster by kind of unfortunately bouncing around. I think we're not in that space where folks work at 30 years at the same company, get the pension, and ride off in the sunset anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, and I guess the last point I want to make for this stage is estate planning. That's one thing that comes up a lot. If you own property, if you have a young family, right, you've got a baby, make sure you get a will done, right? A lot of folks think this is a retirement conversation, or you have to have millions and millions of dollars to have a will. Like, no, a will is very important, and make sure you get that done, especially if you have a young family. Kind of phase two, that 40 to 60 range. So, in your 40s and 60s, right, this is now shifting more towards retirement. You've got responsibilities, right? The kids potentially might be of college age-ish, depending on where you started in your family journey, right? So thinking of this age, what would you think are some of the top things that individuals should be thinking about?
So it's certainly a broad window because when you're, 40 versus 58, your goals are very different, right? A lot of times, a 40-year-old family will be essentially buried right between childcare, working, everything going on in their life, right? Soccer tournaments every weekend. So it can be hard for them to keep up with everything. But when you're looking at it, you really want to focus early on portfolio withdrawal strategies. So being diversified from a tax perspective, where you have some funds in Roth, some in your pre-tax traditional IRA or 401k, and then some in a traditional brokerage account, right? Essentially looking to have different options overall. And if you change jobs and your income's about to jump, evaluating doing Roth conversions and different types of things during these years, because you often have the cash flow to pay the taxes while also being able to really have a higher degree of predictability than maybe you did at 24 as to what your income would look like.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. And I would like to touch on that pre-retirement planning as well, because um, oftentimes folks think about retirement when it's that 5 years away, right? Or maybe give or take a few years. But you should be thinking about your retirement, I mean, as much as you're thinking about anything else, right? The longer you have until retirement, the longer you can course correct the ship if it's off course. So especially if you're in your 40s, 40, you might feel like, hey, retirement's 25 years away. But if you've been under saving, you haven't been invested correctly, right? There's a lot of things that folks should make sure that they think about and review those goals, for more qualitatively and quantitatively, right?
Yeah, and absolutely. And there's a huge positive to it, right? It's not necessarily hitting 65 and then you get to mail it in and be done. That, of course, can be great. But more than that, if you know that your retirement is on track and you're 45, you have the flexibility to take, extravagant vacations if that's what you want, or rent a house down the shore, or buy a condo in Florida, all sorts of different opportunities that arise because you have one of the most important goals on track, that box checked, and you have the flexibility and optionality to do that going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also one thing too, if you've been working at the same company for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, check your 401k allocations. A lot of folks we run into, they're 58, 59, getting ready for retirement, and we'll look at their 401k and it's like, yeah, I set this up when I started at the company when I was 30. And they're like, hey, you're way over, you've done great, good job, right? But a bad timing with a pullback can definitely affect that horizon. So whether retirement's around the corner or kind of down the street, as they say, don't ignore that goal. Make sure you're on top of those.
Absolutely. And I would add another point, 40 to 60, very common time to be caring for aging parents. So that can be more physically caring for or financially, right? And you want to make sure this is something that we help out with a lot, is helping to optimize the estate plan, but more than that, just the day-to-day finances, right? Because things are changing. There's a little bit more there's a few more challenges a lot of times, and it can be very hard for son or daughter to communicate with their parents regarding these things and have their parents listen, and then also have their son or daughter listen to their parents, right? That communication component. So that's where we come in and we can say, here are 3 things that we can help you accomplish. And when it comes from a third party, it ends up in a much stronger position, I would say. Would you agree with that? Anything you would add there?
Yeah, good point. And I think when it comes to aging parents, a lot of folks tend to start putting their names on their parents' accounts. They put their name on the house deed. And yes, this seems like a good short-term solution, but um, I think you should be looking more at paperwork. You should get just financial, a power of attorney, a durable power of attorney, right? Heaven forbid something happens, they're incapacitated. You can make those financial decisions for them, access their accounts, pay their bills. You don't typically want to put your name on their accounts or on any of their assets just from an estate planning and tax purpose. But you want to make sure that they have their affairs in order, right? A living will. It's not fun. We have these conversations with the families we serve, and it isn't, it's a queasy conversation to have, but it's a conversation, that has to happen. So, living will, healthcare surrogate, right? Who do they want to make decisions on their behalf, whether it's all the kids, if it's one person. But having those things in order when they're of sound body and mind, have the conversation once, never talk about it again, but that conversation should be had.
Absolutely. And to an extent, one thing that gets forgotten about estate planning, right? Because it's common for people to drag their feet to get it done, is you already have an estate plan, right? The state of Pennsylvania, the state of California, the state of Florida, right? Essentially, wherever you live, right, there's already a process and a procedure for how things are going to go. So you may as well have a say in it, right? You may as well write it down yourself and have things updated. Because we've all been through this where a loved one passes and it's chaos, right? Everything is chaos. And nowadays, right, you can't log into any accounts. You can't get any information. It's very difficult to even know where the funds are because most folks don't get paper statements anymore. So you can't even go through somebody's mail or anything like that. And there's just a lot of complexity there. So you want to make sure it's written down by yourself, not by the state or the federal government or whoever it may be that already has these in place that's going to impact you. Did you touch on long-term care as well, Jacky? That would be a good addition as you start to hit those late 50s.
Yep. Another unfun conversation to have. I feel like we have a lot of unfun conversation with our clients sometimes. We talk about their goals. Goals are fun too, but long-term care, right? The statistic is 70% of retirees will have some form of a long-term care event, and some shorter, some longer. And this is, one of the top risks to someone's retirement confidence, especially if you're a married couple. One person goes into a facility, it's a very, very heavy strain on the finances. And then, the surviving spouse, kind of has to manage with what's left over. So long-term care plan is very vital. And, we're speaking with some folks in this space, and they said, the planning has started earlier. It used to be around 55, but folks are looking at around 50 now. Just because if you do look at leveraging a form of insurance, it's usually more cost effective and you can maximize like benefits there. But again, just like your estate plan and your living will, right? It's something you got to talk about it and plan for it, and just having an intentional idea of how you're going to address that as you age.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes us to that next point, 60s and beyond. So these can be very impactful years early on, especially to make positive adjustments. So first, number one thing to focus on, I would say, Social Security strategy, right? You've paid into the system, the Social Security system, for 40 years now. For most people, I believe the statistic is something like a third of folks generally turn on Social Security at 62. Our recommendation most of the time is to wait. It grows 8% a year when you don't take it, and then on top of that, when you do start to take it, let's say 67 or 70, you do get a cost of living adjustment each year, right? So the impact of compounding on waiting can be even greater, right? And according to Michael Keatsy's, the joint life expectancy of a 65-year-old couple is 89 years old. So if you take it at 62, that's almost 30 years of a reduced benefit, right? And if you can wait, I do know I ran an analysis just yesterday, Jacky, for a family we assist, and they were going to receive about 1.5 million over their lifespan from Social Security, right? So that's a very easily forgotten aspect to retirement and how to manage that.
Yeah, and those are some good statistics as well. Yeah, and one thing I would add to that when it comes to Social Security, because it's a conversation we have all the time, is just have an intentional plan. Some folks say, "Hey, you know what? I've been paying to the system my entire life. I don't care. I want to take it at 62 because I just want, I don't know when my ticket's going to get punched, right? So I'm going to take it." That's okay as well. But it depends on what your plan is, depends what your situation is, but just make sure you have an intentional plan. So yeah, but I mean, I don't want to beat up the Social Security conversation too much, but that's usually where we see folks that wait traditionally have that higher benefit, because the 8% raise essentially every year you wait.
Yeah, and if you retire, let's say you can still retire, let's say you retired at 62 and you elect to delay Social Security. You can pull from your retirement accounts, and because you have zero other income, your tax rate is going to be exceptionally low. So it can be a great time to do Roth conversions, to simply take out of your accounts and put into a brokerage account. But when you're taxed at a 10, 12% bracket, as opposed to 24 or 32 like you were in the past, that can save you tens of thousands of dollars over time if you have a strategy in place. So it can be a great time to do that. And that will also take us to our next point, which is required minimum distributions. So now when you hit 73, you do have to start taking from your retirement accounts, your traditional retirement accounts, right? A certain amount, because the IRS wants their taxes. And if you are proactive ahead of time, you can reduce that amount, pay less taxes, and really manage your year-to-year income very, very efficiently. What would you add to that?
I think, yeah, required minimum distributions could be, depending on the level of the resources you have at retirement, can be a kind of a nuisance, right? We have some families that we serve where, just using round numbers, they only need to pull, let's say, $80,000 out the retirement accounts, but because of their savings, they have to pull 120,000, right? So, kind of keeping an eye on that. When we run our plans for our families, we look at what those would be down the line. And, I'll do a step back, back to the 40-60 range. Sometimes those Roth conversions help reducing what your traditional retirement accounts would look like, which then kind of down the line would reduce what your RMDs will look like. So, of course, it gets a little bit nuanced, right? But it is something that you always want to be on top of, or have obviously someone on top of it for you.
And the most impactful years of retirement tend to be those first few years when you first retire, essentially. And one of the risks there is sequence of returns risk. So as much as the market may have done 7 to 10% each year, depending on benchmarks that you're looking at, if you have 3 bad years there and you don't have a proactive plan in place, that can put longer term funds at risk. So in our view, one thing we do for all the retirees we assist is we have a bear market reserve, right? So that's 2 years worth of cash needs or income needs in cash. And one of the best things now is you can get 5% on that. So it's still extremely beneficial, but it does decrease that risk significantly. And with that, the remainder is invested for the long term, right? Because retirement is a long-term goal. It's 30 years. And the biggest risk to most families is not the day-to-day fluctuations in the market, but running out of money, right? Running out of money at age 85, not having enough for the increased healthcare, whatever it may be. And one thing that's come up with inflation over the past couple of years is things have gotten more expensive. So the best way to hedge against that, in our view, is to invest in the market, be a part of the companies that raise prices like Procter and Gamble, and Home Depot and whatever it may be. But being part of that growth going forward pays significant dividends.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just a fun little anecdote. I just saw something released yesterday. The biggest inflation is auto insurance.
Mhm.
So yeah, I felt that. I've been shopping for a while. So everyone has a good person with auto insurance, please reach out to me. But yeah, the bear market reserve is basically what we call it. And I think it helps on both kind of fronts. Quantitatively, right? You have this reserve where hey, if the market bottom falls out tomorrow, you've got 2 years of spending locked in, safe. Your retirement lifestyle doesn't have to be impacted. Um, and I think that from a qualitative standpoint is very helpful. We've had some of our retired families tell us, like, listen, just knowing that I have this 2 years of cash here, I don't watch the market every day. I'm not watching MSNBC or whatever, all these people, that's always kind of selling the bad news. And having that in place just not only helps with the retirement confidence, but also just your own, you can sleep at night, right? The market pulls back tomorrow, you know you've got it handled. But yeah, so making sure you're playing for that is very vital. Um, let's move on to kind of like the legacy planning. I think that's something that we also work with a lot of folks on. What would you say would be some things that individuals should be thinking about at this stage of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think one thing we talk a lot about is estate planning, of course, and we touched a lot on that. But as you start to hit this point, right, and your retirement plan is taken care of, you've done all the proactive steps. I always highly encourage giving while living, right? Because for the most part, the families we serve are not going to spend down all of their retirement assets. And it can be far more rewarding, far more impactful, far more, thrilling to see the actual impact of the funds you're providing to your family. Because if you pass away with $2 million and it goes to your kids, one, you don't get to see the positive impact it has, and two, are they equipped to have now $2 million in their checking account? And if you're doing it over time, where the gift limit is 18,000 this year, you may even do 1,000, you may do 2,000, but you get to help make decisions around where that goes when you gift it. And that can help from a skills perspective, from a long-term investment perspective, really across the board. You can make a huge difference for both yourself and your children.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've seen, some families, right? Young couples that are in that first stage buy their first home from gifts from, their parents that are in this third stage. And it's it's a great feeling to know that, hey, you can provide something for your family. They're a growing family. So that legacy planning is important. And also on the charitable side, right? If it's your alma mater or just a cause that's near and dear to your heart, gifting to those causes that are important to you. Back to talking about those R&Ds, you can basically, let's say you are that person where your required minimum distribution is higher than what your need is. You can choose a portion of that distribution to go to a charity, right? And then that, there's a tax advantage there as well. But so having that in mind is something to think about as you enter that stage, or if you're currently in that stage.
Exactly. And when you have a retirement plan in place, when you have, we use software to build out a Monte Carlo simulation and ensure everyone is comfortable and has their assets invested appropriately. And when that's the case, you have the flexibility to do this charitable giving while living to family, whatever it may be. So when you have that box checked, whether it's in your late 50s or 60s or 70s, retirement can be a lot more fun, right? In terms of what you're looking to do, whether it's a big trip to Greece or, wherever it may, like Como, wherever it may be, can be really, really fun for you, knowing that you can spend whatever you'd like and be totally taken care of.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the last thing, we talked about the estate administration a little bit in the last section, I guess, for those dealing with aging parents. But yeah, just again, not a fun thing, but make sure your estate plan is in order. If you have a ledger of where your accounts are, right? Have everything in one place, all your documents. A lot of the families we serve, they we hold a copy of their will for them, right? Because heaven forbid something happens, whoever's executing your estate might not know where everything is or where all your accounts are. So just having that list, having all your paperwork in one place, there's of course going to be emotional duress there, but at least it will be a little bit less of a obstacle when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And I've said it before, um, highly recommend writing down guidelines for if you are leaving behind funds, what you would like them to go to, because you can do giving while living. But again, if someone receives $1 million upon your passing, and you want it to be for their children's education, not a home in the Bahamas or an Audi, you want to have that written down, not necessarily rules, but guidelines as to what you value and what your story may have been. There's actually a great book, Jacky, called Strangers in Paradise. And it's all about how if there are 3 generations and one's super successful, each generation grows up in an entirely different island, right? An entirely different place. So if you don't pass along what you learned from your generation and your story and what's important, then sometimes that can easily get lost from your generation to generation 2 and generation 2 to generation 3. So you always want to do as much as you can to educate, as to how you got there, as to how you got successful, as to the values and rules you live by that can really help out the remainder of your family.
Excellent point, and also good book recommendation. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Unless Julian, do you have anything else to add? But thank you all for joining us, and also thank you for watching. If you're watching this, we're gonna, this is our first episode recording live and in person. So we're gonna spruce up the place a bit and make and work on it. But appreciate you all joining. And if you have anything you'd like us to discuss, please don't hesitate to reach out. Julian, anything to add before we sign off?
No, that's it. Thanks for joining. We appreciate all the trust that the families and businesses we serve place in us. Otherwise, have a great week. Have a great weekend, depending on when you listen to this. And thanks.
All right, everyone. Have a good one. Take care.